US President Joe Biden has met with leaders from 14 Pacific Island states at the conclusion of a two-day summit at the White House. All of the delegates to the landmark meeting signed on to a declaration resolving to strengthen ties between Washington and the Pacific. This included the Beijing-friendly Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, which was expected to disassociate itself from the document. Biden used the occasion to launch a diplomatic initiative, the Pacific Partnership Strategy. Over $800 million have been committed to the strategy to boost Pacific economies and strengthen resilience to climate change.
It's an initiative we really care about to more effectively coordinate with our allies and partners around the world to better meet the needs of the people across the Pacific. That's why this historic summit, we're making additional and concrete commitments. And we're launching our Pacific Partnership Strategy, the first national U.S. strategy for Pacific Islands, which is a key component to our broader Indo-Pacific strategy.
For more on this new partnership between the U.S. and Pacific Island countries, our reporter Ryan Kilpatrick spoke with Mihai Sora, a Pacific Islands researcher at the Lowy Institute in Australia.
How significant is this summit and the declaration that's come out of it?
I think this summit is a real marker in the sand for US re-engagement in the Pacific. We've seen over the past year or so a lot of high-level US visits to the region and individual statements here and there about their commitment to the region. But where it's fallen short is, there's been skepticism on the part of Pacific countries as to how deep can that engagement go and what can the US really bring and how long can they sustain it. So this summit is a tremendous success in that the declaration that was achieved is very wide-ranging. The US got all the parties to sign up to their 11-point declaration. And it's a really strong symbol for what the US and Pacific countries will be working together on into the future.
This comes against the backdrop of increasing Chinese efforts to shore up their influence in the region. So how does this declaration compare to what Beijing is offering these countries?
There is a lot of overlap. Beijing has also made attempts to capture the language that Pacific countries want to see in declarations of this sort to do with climate change and economic development and development cooperation. Where it differs significantly is that the US is prioritizing existing regional institutions like the Pacific Islands Forum. The Pacific way of cooperating on economic and security and social challenges in the region is to work through established regional architecture. And that is very much front and center to the language that's coming out of this summit. And I think that'll be a real advantage for the US in maintaining its presence and its engagement with Pacific countries.
As you just noted, this declaration is big on regionalism and regional organizations. How does this compare to China's strategy in dealing with countries in the region?
So China typically only deals with countries that recognize China, as opposed to Taiwan, for example. And so it does organize regional meetings with those Pacific countries that recognize China to the exclusion of the others. So there's already a bit of a schism in the region as a result of those sorts of settings. But also typically China prefers to work bilaterally, have one-on-one engagement. And it seems to be making far more progress in that one-on-one engagement, a sort of divide and conquer approach, if you will, rather than working with countries collectively. But that has drawn criticism and I'd say increased the tensions in the region as a result of that schism between those countries that recognize Taiwan and China. And Pacific countries, each and every one of them, want to work cooperatively with larger powers, and they don't want to be forced to choose sides, and they certainly don't want to be pushed away from each other based on individual bilateral relations that individual Pacific countries might have.